10th, 2019. Roll call, please.
President Hansen,
Here.
Vice President Brown,
Here.
Director Nielsen,
Here.
Director Hawthorne,
Here.
Director Floor, here, General Manager Maupin.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, public participation, agendized items. The opportunity for public comment on agendized items will be provided only at the time that they are addressed by the board. Time limitations. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker and 10 minutes total for all speakers combined. Can you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item C, Forbes-Town Pipeline Project. With that, I'll turn it over to North Star, and we have a presentation.
If you don't mind, I'll stand over here with the camera and you can see people also. So my name is Neil Graver. I work with North Star. I work within the Civil Engineering Department of North Star. And North Star has numerous departments, including environmental, building, etc. With me are Cami Loser. She is the Director of the Planning and Permitting Department. And I also have Rich Guevara, who is the design engineer on this project. We were brought on to the project in late 2017 to complete the design, plan, specifications, and estimates for the Forbes-Town Ditch project. That project was funded by a grant from the Prop 1 funding and from the State Water Resources Control Board. That grant has a term from 2015, January 2015, and it ended in 2017. One of the reasons that we're here today is to continue the project under a grant proposal from the Water Agency, and that effort will complete the permitting process, landowner agreements, and I can discuss each of these in further detail if any of you are interested in that, and to complete the project's plan specifications estimate with the construction documents, allowing us to put it out to bid. So those three efforts are yet to be completed, and that's what we're pursuing today, is that effort to get your approval of the plan specifications as they are completed today, move forward to develop contract documents to get this out to bid and construction. Basically, what we have provided the board today is our plans, the specifications that control the construction of the items within that plans, an engineer's estimate of cost and quantities that will be used in bidding the project, and a site map and what we're calling a design basis memorandum or a project scope. That project scope defines the process that we have gone through to look at various alternatives for construction, materials, methodologies, alignments, etc. We then did cost-benefit analysis on each of those alternatives and determined the most feasible construction method to be implemented for the pipeline. The conclusion of that is what our current set of plans are based on. The document that has been presented is simply a recordation of the process that led to that document preparation and why we chose the alternates that we did. For your understanding and the public's understanding, I'll go through a very brief but more concise explanation of the process that we've gone through that's represented in that report. If I get to verbose for long, please let me know. So the process that we entered in with the Water Control Board contract was to start with a design basis memorandum. That process included reviewing all the prior reports, studies, analysis, They've been completed by other consultants for the district over the past 10 years or so. Interview the staff as far as what their operational needs were as far as the ditch. Walk the ditch alignment, looking for issues that need to be included in the design for resolution. And finally, it included analysis of costs as far as maintenance and repairs that have been ongoing over the ditch. So with all that information, we then kind of prepared what were the goals and the scope of our project, what we were going to try to accomplish for the district after reviewing that design basis information. Essentially, the biggest goal was to prevent water loss. Currently, the district loses approximately 60% of the water that is discharged from Sept 14. That's the South Feather Power and Water distribution point that we receive water into the ditch. Those losses are caused by evaporation, geological formations that include cracks in the rocks that allow water to seep out of it, and occasionally breaches in the levee system that contain the water. So water loss is one of the primary concerns. Secondary concerns are water contamination. The open ditch as it exists today was constructed approximately 1850s. It receives surface water from upland flows. It is subject to exposure to animal products, organic materials decomposition. Also, surface flows pick up minerals from the existing ground, including aluminum, silver, zinc, and discharge it into the ditch, all of which have to be dealt with in the treatment plant. Other regular occurrences were failures of the ditch. I'll talk about the zones and why those failures occur. The existing levee system along the ditch occasionally during extreme winter conditions fails due to hydrostatic pressures. We'll go into detail on that, but it basically blows out, meaning that we have to shut down water within a very short period of time, reconstruct those repairs at a high cost, and get the water delivered again. So failure was preventing those failures in the future is another major goal of the project. One of the other observations that dictated our design was the fact that it's a high mountainous terrain, the upper ditch. It's a ditch that's built on the side of very steep hills and canyons. It's hard to get to. There are many portions where the ditch follows the contour of the land far away from the road, and getting equipment, materials, and supplies there is difficult, both for ongoing maintenance and our proposed construction project. So those are the four major considerations that led to the design that we've chosen today. After we did our design basis memorandum, we conducted field surveys. We did a detailed topographic survey of the length of the ditch, picking up all the various terrain features, siphon inlets, outlets. Siphons are when the water drops into a steel pipe, transfers down below a valley and comes out the other side. There are a number of flumes where there's carried across canyons and locations. There are, in the lower area, there are private facilities that cross the ditch, including pressurized septic effluent and gravity effluent, gas, propane gas, private water systems, etc. that cross the ditch. All of those were picked up with the topographic information, and that was necessary to allow us to move forward with the design. Another part was we hired a consultant, Vertical Sciences, and Jim Bianchin, the geotechnical engineer who is very familiar with this area, walked the ditch with me, and we did a preliminary analysis to determine what further geotechnical investigations were necessary to support our design project. He provided numerous alternatives. Prior to describing those alternatives, I need to point out that this ditch is really in two different geographical formations or characteristics. And we describe those as the upper ditch and the lower ditch. So the upper ditch basically is the mountainous terrain in which the ditch has been built along the side of a very steep canyon. The lower ditch, starting from Costa Creek Siphon on into the Forbstown Treatment Plant, is flatter, more urban, there's housing around it, etc. So those are two very distinct types of constructions and needs to address. The geological report really looked at the upper portion of the ditch, the mountainous areas. What was determined that there are two areas of this ditch that are specifically subject to failures and leakage. The first failure starts after the Orleave Creek. The ditch heads out along a contour leading the roadway areas. That area has some very fractured rock material below it. The leakage from that area is phenomenal. That's when we hiked it a number of times, we noted water discharging at a number of locations through cracks in the soil. Numerous attempts in the past to line the ditch with either shotcrete or plastic have done some effort to preventing it. However, they require a great deal of maintenance, are costly, and regularly subject to failure. So that's one geological type of problem that we're dealing with that we can address. The other is a land formation below the Woodleaf camp, Woodleaf siphon, extending to what we call the falls, and that's where the ditch transitions about 500 feet vertical through an open crevice, and then goes into the lower portion of the ditch that I described earlier. This section has two layers in the subgrade. Underlying layer is a very dense gray clay material. It's completely impervious, meaning that no water will go through it. All water sits on the surface of it. Overlying that layer is a layer of red, silty, sandy material. It's subject to absorption of water. Water doesn't pass through it very easily, but it will accept water. It becomes very heavily. The interface between these two materials becomes a slip plane. And the geologist wrote in his report, and we observed it in the field, that historic evidence shows that this has been a continuously slow-moving mass of material, red material on top of the lower area. It continuously slides down the mountain. It has, and probably will forever. We've seen a lot of these type of areas. Highway 101 north of Ukiah going to the town above it, I can't remember the name. It's constantly moving down. Yeah, right, Will. It's constantly moving. It's similar to this. This is similar to that. It's gonna move. It always will move. We could be like Caltrans and constantly rebuild it, or try to prevent it by excavating and putting massive soil stabilization efforts that if you've driven along the area, you've probably seen over the past 10 years, these efforts. Those stabilization efforts include, placement of horizontal drains, trying to get the water out of the red silty layer, driving pile plates into the gray material, trying to stabilize and stop the upper portion from moving on it. Providing pipeline supports, that's basically building a bridge that has a foundation down in the lower layer, allowing the materials to slide around those supports, maintaining the ditch on top or the pipe on top. Various other things, soil nailing, buttress stabilizations, etc. The geotechnical engineer gave us cost analysis to implement each of these things. When we did cost-benefit analysis associated with each of those, it was very apparent very quickly that we could continue to repair the ditch for the life of the project in the way that we've been repairing it in the past, and not even come near the cost of any one of the soil stabilization efforts. So the conclusion of that kind of analysis is really a do nothing. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything. We need to design a project that will allow us to compensate and address the movement of that mountain as it continues. So this is about a mile length of material that is continuously problematic. So with that, we started analyzing what types of materials to use for the pipe construction. We looked at concrete pipe. Concrete pipe is very stout. Obviously it won't burn, it's not subject to ultraviolet radiation. It is, however, very heavy, meaning that it takes large equipment to transport it to the site, large equipment to haul it along the circuitous route of the pipe, the ditch, and heavy equipment to place it. So it would be difficult to maintain. It costs about $170 per linear foot placed. And so that proved to be an acceptable alternate, but a costly alternate. Other was a material called a welded HDPE. So HDPE is a high-density polyethylene material. In this case, the pipe, I'll describe it with my hands. It's a very thick layer of solid plastic rim on the outside. What they do is they bring it in long lengths. They use a special equipment on the ground to heat the ends and then butt fuse the two ends together so it becomes one continuous length of pipe. Advantages are that there's no seams, it won't pull apart, and it's able to be moved and flex as the ground moves underneath it. It could also transport pressure flows. If the pipe were to sag and go into a sag, it would maintain the flows because the water's not leaking out of joints or splitting out anywhere. So that was a very viable alternative. It, however, again, is about $130 a linear foot. It requires special construction tools and materials, the welding apparatuses, transporting these long sections of pipe along the pipeline or ditch alignment. And then maintenance in the future would be very difficult for the district staff to operate. They would have to have this special equipment. They would have to have heavy equipment to get the materials in and out and in place. So although it was a viable alternative, it was too expensive and it was too difficult for future staff to continue maintaining efficiently. The third alternate was what we have ultimately settled upon, and it is again a high-density polyethylene pipe. It's a smooth bore interior with corrugated exterior, so it has good strength characteristics, good flow factor characteristics. It comes in 20-foot lengths with a factory installed gasketed joint, so it's fairly well sealed, it's held together with a good connection. It has the major advantage in that it's very lightweight. It can be installed with a backhoe, a number of crew help moving it into place. It can be repaired if there's holes in it due to someone choosing to shoot it with a gun or whatever. They can be welded shut quite easily. So all these materials, all the equipment, all the methodologies of placement and repair are suitable to what we perceive future staff will be able to accomplish for the district. So we did choose that as the preferred alternative. Its costs are relatively less at $95 per linear foot. Still a good price, but something that the district can afford and we can get grant funding to support the construction of. So the other portions of the alternative analysis are alternative alignments. Prior studies had looked at completely realigning the project. That would require, intuitively it says, yeah, that's a great idea because from here to the next point, the treatment plant being a straight line, much less materials, etc., rather than this circuitous following contours of the mountain down to the treatment plant. The problem with that is that as the pipe descends down the side of the canyon and then comes up the other side of the canyon, the pressures inside the pipe become phenomenal. The only types of material that could contain the pressures of that would be a ductile iron pipe. The cost of ductile iron pipe is way beyond the capacity of our grant funding opportunities. Additionally, it would require right-of-way acquisitions, extreme environmental permitting and mitigation, all of which outweighed the decision to go with the existing alignment. So, with respect to the existing alignment, original concepts and cost analysis were done to place the pipe and bury it. Basically, you'd start at the top end, you'd excavate the pipe alignment or the ditch alignment, place the pipe, import material and backfill and cover it. Therefore, you have a road to drive down on top of to continue the construction and maintenance on down. The cost became prohibitive due to the imported material. We would have to haul in tremendous amounts of earth from some other location to cover this pipe. There is no net materials in the existing berm and ditch to allow that to happen without importing materials. That became extremely cost ineffective and prohibitive. The second alternative was to place the pipe on the existing alignment of the ditch, or the third alternative, I should say, and not bury it. And so we looked and talked to a number of water agencies that do the same thing. We asked them about the problems they had with it, and we considered the benefits of doing such an application. One of the problems of burying the pipe that we discovered after working with the failures in early 2018 was that the mode of failure was the pipes floated in the ground. So if any of you have pools or septic tanks that have been emptied, you know there's extreme risk of those things popping up out of the ground due to water pressure underneath them lifting. The same thing will occur with a pipe along the alignment. Water will gather in the prior ditch. It will actually float and pop out of the ground. Hydrostatic pressure pushing from the side of those pipes will also push them out of the side of the earth horizontally. Those were the modes of failure of the prior repair projects that were done, or the need for the repair projects that were done in early 2018. So burying the pipe had those problems associated with it. Above ground placement did not include that. They won't float. As long as we can keep the ditch dry and empty, the pipes won't float. So that was a very good opportunity to take advantage. Secondly, when it's buried, you can't see the deformation of the pipe when the earth moves. And as I noted, there's a section in this pipeline where the earth will continue to move. So the proposal with the above ground allows us to paint the joints and then regularly, quickly inspect to see where the paint has become exposed to deformation and movement of the joints. Now, these joints in this type of pipe can move quite a bit without losing the potential for carrying the water. So they can move. If we see joint displacement, then we can act accordingly in advance of the failure, keeping the pipeline in place. The pipe would be placed on top of foundation blocks at every 10 feet. It's strapped into place on that pipe to hold it in place. The foundation blocks will provide support. They essentially are a concrete block, like imagine a very large parking bumper out in a parking lot, set on base material down in the bottom of the ditch. The advantage to this type of placement is that as this mountain moves and we see a deflection downward in the pipe, we can simply loosen the straps, place shimming underneath the pipe, raise it back to grade, reposition it on the alignment, and tighten it down again. We can continue this project for many years, this process for many years. When the deflections become too great to adjust for, it's a very easy operation for maintenance staff to disassemble these pieces of pipe, come in with a small backhoe equipment, regrade the bottom of the existing channel, and reset the blocks and strap the pipe down. So in this way we can accomplish the goal of maintaining the pipe, still letting the mountain do what nature wants it to do, to slide on down the hill. Preventing that from moving will be far too costly. So, we've produced plans based on that analysis. We've chosen the N12 HDPE jointed pipe based on our conclusions and economic analysis. We chose an open placement on the upper portion of the ditch. The lower portion of the ditch, however, we're not gonna place open ground. That portion of the ditch is too exposed to human activity. There's a lot of people in the area, whether intentionally or unintentionally, they could impact the integrity of that pipe system. So we will bury it there. Again, the problem that we will be addressing is the fact that the pipe wants to float. So instead of the concrete block anchors down in that area, we'll be driving what are called wedge piles or wedge supports. They basically, you drive them down to the ground, you jack on them, a spoon handle opens up, and it prevents them from lifting out of the ground. We'll hold the pipe down with that, bury it. Everywhere we're crossing private roadways, private accesses, we're gonna be replacing the roadway, rebase rocking, repairing it to prior conditions. As we move forward in the next stage of this process that we're hoping to get approval for today, we will be doing what we call land ownership agreements. We'll be reaching out to each of the owners, discussing the project, what the impacts, potential impacts to their property will be, coming to an agreement of how we're gonna leave the project when we're done with the work. Many people have private facilities crossing the creek, the channel right now, including pedestrian bridges, ornamental features. All of these things need to be dealt with in an agreement form prior to us coming in. We do have the right to go in and remove and replace the pipe in a maintenance effort, but it certainly does not help us to have someone become upset and angry during the construction projects due to unknown impacts on their property. So we want to get that all out front and address it early. So a major portion of the work that we're continuing wasn't included in the original grant funding is landowner agreements. And so that's a big effort that's going to be coming up very soon that we'll move forward with. I think I've hit the majority of the points that are covered in the scope of work. Report has been provided to you. I'm certainly open to addressing any questions that you might have. And if you feel like I've missed anything, let me know, and I can either answer the questions on my own or with the support of Rich, the design engineer, or Kenny, the permitting officer. I'm here to help.
This was reviewed by another engineering firm,
Right.
wasn't it, after you completed it?
Yes, right. So, it's always good to get peer reviews. I never reject the opportunity. When Yuba Water Agency suggested that they may be able to provide some funding to support the construction of the project, they wanted us to have a peer review with another company that was named at the time Sage Engineering. Sage Engineering does a lot of work for PG&E and other operations that do similar side hill construction projects. We did a same type of similar presentation to Sage. They received our plans, specifications, and estimates, and they didn't have many comments. Some of them we could explain, they were pretty benign. Some of them really opened our eyes to some better opportunities, all of which were implemented in the current plan today. So I see it as a very net positive with no cost to the district, and the product will be better because of that review.
Where are the CEQA documents?
I'll have to ask Cammie to address that, so that you need to understand that this project needs to be complete so we know what the design project, so we know what the entire impacts of the project are. Up until recently, and probably until the completion of the landowner agreements, we really won't know the routes of access to the pipeline or the impacts due to staging and construction areas. So prior to having her answer your question, you need to understand that those things need to be determined before we completely can address the environmental impacts.
CEQA was part of your original scope of work, yes?
It is. Yeah.
Okay, and has anything been done on CEQA yet?
So as part of the original design prior to what Sage had reviewed, we had conducted some initial site walks and visits for biological resources and cultural. And then, we have drafted a CEQA document, but it hasn't been released because of the changes that were incorporated, from Sage, as well as being able to identify potential staging areas, access routes. And in portions of where there's undercrossings and where water is being turned out and designs have changed there, we haven't completed the CEQA.
So you don't have an accurate, complete, comprehensive project description yet?
Well, we do now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the timeline on CEQA documents for this then?
So we would initiate the CEQA documents after we get through this process here. So probably about 6 weeks to complete the draft document, as long as we have all of the access points and all the remaining components that would be necessary to complete the project description, to complete the evaluation.
Okay, so, then the scope of work is a little bit premature because we don't have CEQA documents to look at. And as we all are aware, CEQA has at least a 45-day public review period, and
So currently, as proposed, we have, and the scope of work is kind of an interesting label to call what you have in front of you. It really should be the project description. Then we'll incorporate, other environmental, maybe best management practices and things that will be part of the project into the project description for the initial study. The initial study at this point is what we're assuming would be the resulting document, would be a mitigated neg deck, just based on the potential for species, cultural, and other issues. And then, assuming if it is a mitigated negative declaration and not something like an environmental impact report, then it would be a 30-day public review period for that, receiving comments from the public on the neg deck, and then we would respond to those comments, address any other additional issues associated with those comments, and then complete that portion, which then would come back to the board.
so this is all predicated on the fact that, you know, all other agencies that potentially are interested, like Army Corps of Engineers, CDFW, U.S. Special Allied Service.
Right, so they would review the initial study document and proposed mitigated neg deck as part of the public review period.
Mhm.
And then, whatever additional comments they might even have would be responded to accordingly. Subsequent to that, or maybe even concurrently with the initial study, we would do other regulatory compliant permitting, whatever that might look like. At this point, there potentially would be the Army Corps of Engineers 404 and 401
Mhm.
permitting process because of the locations of the turnouts. So if there's something like that, we would initiate
And
that.
CDFW also for 1602 agreements.
Yes, well, if it's considered a stream, but right now the ditch is a ditch and not a stream. In the locations of where there are the turnouts, if that is something that's within their jurisdiction, then we would look at the 1602.
Have you reached out to CDFW yet to see if they're going to claim jurisdiction?
We haven't, just because we didn't have a complete project to discuss with them.
Okay, so this all seems a little bit premature.
Could you talk about the size of the pipe?
I can, yes.
What were the thinking there, and what went into the decision?
Sure. So, the delivery requirements for this pipe system are 24 cubic feet per second, 11 of which will go to our required distributions to South Feather Power and Water at the treatment plant. That 24 CFS includes future build-out, et cetera, and it's been a long-range goal. It's been presented as our design goal from the onset of the project. We did an initial hydraulic analysis that included pipe and fitting losses, profile grades for the entire length of the pipe system. initially, we were hoping to construct the pipe system with a 36-inch pipe. Our analysis showed that that was nominally acceptable. That there was only a couple sections that we were at or near capacity, meaning that the pipe would go from open channel flow characteristics to pressure flow characteristics. After the SAGE review, they reported to us that they've completed similar analysis on numerous projects, always to their dismay that the pipe could never adequately carry what their mathematical models showed it should. What they suggested in order to for us to prevent having that occur was to apply some more conservative values in our analysis. So basically, instead of analyzing our system with the friction factor of the pipe being 0.011, we upped it to 0.013, which would be rougher than we would certainly expect for N12 type pipe. N12 being a roughness factor of 12. So we went to a roughness factor of 13. When we did that, we found numerous sections that had gone to pressure flow, which is unacceptable. We considered the options of increasing only those areas to larger pipe size. The next nominal size is a 42-inch. However, the hydraulic characteristics from going from a 36 to a 42 inches are not a problem. Going from 42 to a 36 caused a lot of issues in our model that weren't acceptable. It was determined that the cost difference between 36 and 42 didn't justify the change in sizing material as we transitioned down the pipe. The lower section, which is much flatter through the residential areas, was already going to be 42-inch. So we determined to move the entire pipe alignment, with the exception of the Oraliva Creek section, to 42-inch pipe sizing. Did I answer your question? Is that...
It does, and so that means that throughout the entire piping system, there's an air
Yes, open
area
channel
at
flow.
the top of the pipe,
Yep.
above the water.
Yeah, never goes to pressure flow. It's always an open channel situation. And there's a lot to analyze in our model. Every time we pass through a manhole-like structure, every time we pass through a box through turnout, every time we enter or exit a siphon, all of these things cause what we call frictional head loss. That all has to be included in the analysis to justify or to model the pipe correctly.
So this pipe can never go above 24 CFS.
No, that's not true. With the 42-inch size, there is additional capacity. We've designed it for 24 CFS.
How much additional
I can't
capacity?
say. We didn't model it based on that. What we would have to do is incrementally increase the flows until we saw the situation occur that led to pressure flow.
Pressure is, right.
And then we could say that is the capacity of today's, or the proposed design. At this time, I don't know what it is.
Not even a small ballpark.
Not really, no.
Okay.
The ability, I mean, a lot of this is environmental more than I guess anything else. There's a lot of locations, especially along the lower ditch, if you will, that exist because there's been leakage over the years. Are we gonna hear about things that are gonna be done to this pipe to sort of either maintain those areas or allow for wildlife? That'll come in the CEQA?
We'll look at all of the biological resources, including wildlife or habitat along the ditch. So, in our cursory review and our preliminary site walks and things, there's not really a sensitive natural community or habitat that's been created. You know,
Okay.
there's not like a vernal pool habitat that now has tadpole, fairy shrimp kind of thing
Yeah.
within it. So, I mean, there are habitats that utilize the water from that, but some of that same water will still remain in the ditch at the different areas of turnouts.
But the Army Corps of Engineers will still claim jurisdiction over ditches, man-made or otherwise, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will also claim jurisdiction wherever there's riparian habitat. They have jurisdiction as well.
Right,
So there could absolutely be the idea of mitigating neg deck is you have to mitigate.
yeah, and so I think that
So-
there are also, there are mitigations that could be available. It just depends on the specific locations along the ditch that we would be addressing some of those issues. And then looking at the specific characteristics of some of those habitats.
So in terms of the mitigated neg deck and CEQA, where does fire protection come into play?
So there's the new section within CEQA for wildfire. It doesn't specifically address the issues associated with fire in that way. It's really looking at some
So are there any sorts of hookups along this pipe that will allow CAL FIRE or fire departments to come in and hook up to use that water for fire protection in this extreme high-risk fire area?
Every 1,000 feet maximum, there is an access port constructed in the ditch, which can be opened up. and-
Would that be constructed to work with the fire department's hookups?
So I'm not envisioning up in that area a pumper truck coming up and hooking up to it as you would a fire hydrant in an urban area. Areas like that, it would be a tank truck that would be driving and would drop his siphon hose into an open channel or existing pond or something such as. They could easily drop it into one of these access ports and pump water out into the tank that way. There wouldn't require any specific hookup to do that or accomplish it.
Are
But
these things
remember-
gonna be locked though? Cause I assume that you don't want them available to the public
That's
to
right.
just drive up and start helping themselves to water.
Yeah,
So is this something that fire departments would have the ability to access without having to make a dozen phone calls?
certainly we could make provisions to coordinate that, yeah. It's just a lock. So, I mean, there's many gates all through this area that have 5 locks on it for various organizations. Similar situations could be put on these access ports too.
When you talked about the staging areas, has there been any proposed areas that are, you're looking at currently and who owns that property?
Right. We have proposed areas based on field examination and review. I think they're represented on with the
It's on our plan, it should
Yeah. land owner agreements process has not begun. Certainly those would be areas where we would need to coordinate. Most of them are in the upper area, upper ditch, are relative to prior logging landings, skid roads for access, wide areas along the highway. All of these still need to be discussed with the owners. My belief is the upper portions of the ditch, there is a great deal of support for the project and access to prevent open failures or failures of the ditch on their lands. So I don't perceive difficulty with land agreements in the upper portion of the ditch. I think the nuances of land acquisition or land agreements will be in the lower area of the ditch. We have identified a number of operational areas there, of which discussions with district staff lead us to believe that it's going to be something that's pretty achievable as far as a landowner agreement.
So in your modeling, did you do a modeling for the upper Forbes Town ditch, which is not gonna be buried, but is basically just gonna be an above ground
Yeah.
pipe? In the existing ditch?
Yep.
We get an average of 43 inches of rain per
Yes.
year, so did you model that? And what
Yes.
happened to the pipe when you had that much water?
Right, so our project, I failed to describe surface flows and how we're addressing it. There's 2 types of surface flows that we need to deal with. One is just general sheet flow coming from uplands that fall into the ditch. Others are tributary streams that have collected water already and proceed to the ditch. So you're right. When surface flows enter the ditch, they begin flowing along the ditch. Now we have an open pipe that's set within the ditch basin. Our design includes an area on the upper side of the channel, on the higher hillside portion of the channel, to convey water adjacent to the concrete mounting blocks. At regular intervals and specific intervals that are associated with existing tributary stream areas, we discharge that water through what we call a dip. So the adjacent berm as it exists today is going to be lowered. Much of that material from the lowering will be used to set the foundation blocks, good material, solid material. Where we come to these areas where we want to discharge drainage from the ditch to the downside, we're going to construct what we'll call an engineered dip. Basically, that berm's going to transition to a level equal to the bottom of the ditch. It's going to be rock lined, armored with the geotextile fabric and facing material, Caltrans classification facing material, with heavier rock slope protection at the point of discharge downstream. At that point, it'll go into the historical drainages that existed prior to the ditch construction. The same will be done for all of the tributary flows that are coming to the ditch. The major difference is that they'll be significantly larger with heavier materials to address those flows. Each of the basins have been sized using geographical contour topography. Using a rational method, we've calculated the flows that we expect to see during significant storm events, and we've designed and sized the ditch, the rock protection, and the discharge points based on those flows.
Have you also included in your plan how you're gonna divert this water out? Suppose we're going to construction and we're actually doing this. How are you gonna keep the water running?
Yeah.
Because the water has to keep going.
Yeah.
So what is the plan for diverting the water around the construction area and back into where it needs to go?
Right,
And how are you going to leapfrog that?
right. Those are
Excuse me for bringing up frog. How are you gonna leapfrog that all the way down the ditch?
those are powerful questions, and honestly, that is the most difficult component of the construction process. Now, it's not my job to specify the contractor's operation. My job is to specify the operational requirements, and that is that during the non-irrigation season, he needs to provide water to the treatment plant every 10 days. The concepts, and we've met with a number of contractors and discussed the ideas. The concept that we're basing the construction schedule on, it's a 3-year operation simply because of the time required to do what you're describing or discussing or questioning. The concept are that you shut off the water, you operate in a portion of the ditch, constructing the pipeline in downward progression, so starting at SF-14 or wherever that phase of construction is going to begin. You have to do some water mitigation, we called it something else. It was a dewatering, and then placing the materials blocks and setting the pipeline.
We've typically used coffer dams and then dewatered and then diverted around. And
Yeah.
we even use that on the Carmel River.
Yeah, so
I don't think we're proposing to do that.
we're not gonna build coffer dams, there's not a need, because we can shut the water off. We can turn off SF-14. We can close the gates on Orleave Creek for 10-day periods, continue construction downstream. Then we simply reopen the valves, let water flow until the reservoir at the treatment plant is full.
So
and
you're
shut it off
saying you're
again.
gonna do construction in 10-day increments and then turn everything back on, take everything away, let the water go, and then come back in? That sounds like a very expensive mob, demob proposition.
Absolutely, yeah. 3-year mob, demob is a significant effort shown in our engineer's estimate. But no, not take everything away. So again, it's not my intent to direct the contractor's operation. He may find that it's very efficient for him to cap the ending point of his term construction with a eccentric reducer, put in a 12-inch pipeline from that point that's more flexible, continuing it down the ditch for 1,000 feet, at which point the water is discharged in the ditch downline. He's maintained a dry bed for him to continue work on in 3 days after he's filled the treatment plant. Take the cap off, move the pipe aside, continue his construction, put the cap on, extend the pipe.
And that makes more sense, and that's how I've always done that
So-
type of construction.
But again, my goal, or my engineering practices don't allow me to direct the contractor's operation other than to specify what he is to accomplish. If I were to put on the plans, you shall put a cap on, put 1,000 feet of pipe, continue the construction, and that method didn't work. Now I have a change order on my hand to allow him to do something. So I'm only specifying, we have analyzed opportunities to achieve our goal that have led to our analysis that this really is a 3-year construction project. There are MOB and DMOB costs associated with that. We included that with the engineer's estimate. But we will ultimately entertain whatever the contractor proposes to continue water flows per the specified requirements.
So you factored in the demobilization into it. And in my mind, I perceive a contractor's gonna probably try to come up with an idea that puts them back to work as quick as possible.
Absolutely.
So really, what you're saying is this was more something that the construction company is gonna be handling, and I'm sure they're gonna be wanting to do it in the most efficient manner so they can get back to work. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are other opportunities. A large construction company may have 4 or 5 construction areas in continuously.
Good point.
Yeah, so that he only, he can do 5 times the amount in a 10-day period of time, then he discharges water through all 5 areas and continues on. If he has 5 crews, he can move quickly. But again, that's not my authority to tell him how to do his work. We'll give him the number of working days. We'll give him an estimate that covers the cost per our basic understanding of how he might operate. Then it's up to him to maximize the ability to do his work.
So the way this is being described is, am I to understand that North Star is actually going, you guys are actually gonna be managing the contractors, or is that North Yuba that's gonna be managing the contractors?
We have no construction administration portion in our current contracts with Yuba Water District. At the time that the project goes out to bid, I would expect that North Yuba Water District would hire a resident engineer and a construction management. We can certainly provide that. We're not saying that it will be us.
Okay.
What about Orleans Canal, the ditch?
Yeah.
Is
So-
that included in this as
Yes,
well?
it is.
And it'll be a 42 inch pipe?
No, it won't. It'll be a
Okay.
36 inch.
Okay,
Right. There's no reason for it to be 42.
okay. And that'll come into a concrete
So,
basin as you see?
The
along?
hydraulic characteristics of the existing confluences of the Orleva siphon, the Orleva ditch entrance, and then the exit into the continuation of the ditch, they work. There are concrete structures with gates, measuring devices. It's not our intention to tear that out or to replace it. What we will be doing is discharging into it from the Orleva siphon. The Orleva siphon, which is actually our ditch project. Accepting water from the Orleva ditch, then accepting it into our new pipeline just downstream of the confluence. So we're not gonna disrupt the structures at that location, nor at the Costic Creek turnout towards Dry Creek. Those we're gonna leave intact as they are. They operate well. We don't wanna change that operational characteristics at this time.
And you'll use the existing flumes?
Yes, this project does not include the replacement of the flumes. However, Because of the hydraulic losses discharging into and receiving out of the flumes, which are very large, we're proposing to continue the pipeline across the flumes.
Okay,
So there's modifications to remove the upper supports that cross the opening of the flume, raise them to a higher level and a less frequent interval, because we no longer are supporting the side pressure of water. Setting the pipe and then putting a new walkway on top of the new set supports. Those modifications will occur to the flume. The advantage will be that continued leakage that causes deterioration of the wood flume materials will be stopped.
Do these plans also include the establishment and maintenance of access roads? Because the upper Forbes Sound ditch, it's the well-known fact, access is very difficult. It's great that there's all these things in place to maintain, to make maintenance a little bit easier. It's not gonna be easy though if we don't have access roads.
So what we are proposing is, with the land agreements, to obtain construction access to the ditch on many of these roads that we're talking about now. Probably in conjunction with those landowner agreements, there will be some condition at which they want the roads left. We don't perceive that we're going to own those roads or secure permanent access rights. There are numerous locations, and there does not appear to be any resistance from the large forest industry owners to us continuing to access our ditch using those skid roads. So, have I answered your question?
Well, it sounds like, obviously, you'll have access roads to build it, but it doesn't sound like there's anything in this particular group of plans or scopes of work or anything else that talks about making sure that those access roads stay accessible
Yeah.
in the future.
Without land acquisition, that's different from landowner agreements. Without land acquisition, I don't know how we can build, own, and maintain those access roads. We'd have to acquire that land from the various companies. At this point, that's not in our scope, and we're not anticipating having to do that, nor do we really perceive the need to do that. There doesn't appear to be any rejection from these owners to us accessing the ditch to operate it.
So our ability to access basically is gonna be based on goodwill with the people that own the properties.
We access it currently.
yeah.
Yeah, we've had no
the-
trouble accessing any of
the
our
levee
ditch.
basically.
Also, you might comment that when you take down the berm, you also create a drivable road.
Are you talking maybe
Right,
along the ditch or the road, the
Getting-
pipeline? Is that?
Correct,
okay.
along the pipeline, for example, I do a lot of work with PG&E,
Mhm.
and we have PG&E access roads, except that trees grow up, and pretty soon those access roads are not accessible anymore. So in theory, there's a road, but you can't actually use it to access what you need to access. And I don't see anything different with, accessing the facility for,
Right.
specifically for operations and maintenance.
Right.
If,
So-
you know, going back to if those blocks slip and we need to
Yeah.
do something.
Now I understand your question. Yes. So the existing berm is approximately 4 foot wide across the top of it. It's enough for a small ATV or personnel to walk or hike along. That's the way they access it now to maintain and operate the ditch. When we construct, we plan on removing the top of that berm because we're gonna use that material to stabilize the bottom of the ditch prior to placing the anchor blocks. We anticipate removing a foot off the top. That foot removal from the top with one side slopes will result in a top of approximately 6 feet across. We've looked at trees, impacts. There will be some trees that need to be removed to build that 6 foot wide access. That's not sufficient for large equipment, but remember, with our proposal, we're talking about maintenance access using gators. They can bring in materials and supplies necessary, including the type of pipe that we're talking about placing. In many cases, a small pickup truck might be accessible on it with a 6 foot wide top, but really it's gonna be gator and small backhoe access. That's gonna be continuous along the ditch with one exception. Where we leave the siphon and follow the contour out around the large mountain area, access is available in old skid roads. We couldn't clearly define how it was achieved. We know that it was achieved because so much of that area, which is the fractured rock material that leaks, has been shotcreted. So how did the shotcrete get there? Access must have been through an upper area. We're proposing not to enclose that portion of the ditch because the shotcrete is in very good condition. It's not leaking in that area. Also, the access berm is broken by the flumes, so you can't drive a gator across the flume. The material of the roadway access down below the flume is not good, so there are portions, as shown on the plans, that will remain shotcrete channel there and only there. Other than that, we're enclosing the entire ditch system.
So that was a big leading factor to the pipe you chose, was the access.
Yep.
And how to get replacement parts in there, and how is our crew gonna get to it, and with the equipment we currently own.
Exactly right. It would take, to have first off, to build the road or the pipeline buried such that you have a wide road on top of it, that in itself would cost a tremendous amount. It would require heavy equipment to move and place dirt, and it would not allow the future maintenance of an observation of the pipe in the ditch, as I described earlier. Observation is going to be our key to maintenance and preventive adjustment prior to prevent failures. So accessing it by a gator is pretty rational. You can drive the ditch very quickly and observe what's going on at each joint.
Anybody have more questions?
As I understand it, when we approve, if we approve this, basically all we're saying is that we will go with the plan as you laid out, and once, in the footprint essentially, and that will allow you then to complete the other aspects of the CEQA, finding staging areas and things like that. That'll come back to us then as a separate approval process, and at some point down the line, we'd have to approve the whole thing for construction anyway. So there's still steps here that we can step in and say, wait a second.
Yes.
Okay. So this just allows us to move forward and complete what we actually got you guys contracted to do.
Continue towards the construction document completion.
Right, which is what the whole point was.
Yep.
Yeah.
This also allows us to confidently move forward with the project description for CEQA, as well as approaching the regulatory agencies with the project to get their input on permitting approach and being able to see along the ditch if different areas that might require some regulatory permits from either the Corps or California Fish and Water, State CDF.
California
Fish and
Department of Fish and
Yeah,
Wildlife.
I only know
It's
about.
confusing when they change
The
their name.
CDF, yeah, I'm like, wait, so,
Just call it CDFG,
yeah, and so that way we can actually meet with them with something versus what we, instead of saying, well, we might do this and we might do that, and we might have this here, now we can say, here's an example of what we will be proposing at this location, maybe as at a turnout, what will you require for that permitting? And be able to identify any potential mitigation for if there is riparian habitat or whatever whatever we might be impacting. So at least we have now something to bring forward that's a little more concrete.
Also, just to point out the agenda item, the operative word, it is proposed that the board accept the following documents. It doesn't say approve.
Right.
So it means that they're giving us something to look at, and we're accepting the thing they're giving us to look at.
Well, I make a motion, we accept North Star's.
Second.
Okay. A roll call, public comment. Yes, sir.
I have a simple question, John Bergman, Brown Lane. You're dealing with plastic pipe, and we are in a fire zone. I know it's big, thick plastic, but we're still in a fire zone. Could someone speak to that? I know concrete doesn't burn, I know iron doesn't burn. And I looked at the Loma Rica fencing, and it was awesome where it sagged. Could someone address the theory, the flammability / durability in a fire?
Oh, I'm not gonna sit here and turn around and talk to you. That's
Oh, you
rude. Yes, it's been a concern, it is a concern. Certainly, horrendous forest fires will impact the pipe. We look at the history of the existing pipe system, including the flumes, which are all wooden structures. Many of them date back to the beginning of the century, the turn of the century. No fire damage to them at this point. We know that things are changing, environmental conditions are changing such that high-intensity forest fires will occur. The pipe that we've chosen is subject to damage by fire. It is resistant, and we've done a lot of discussions with a particular pipe manufacturer, ADS. They can demonstrate that the resistance to fire, particularly if there's water flowing in it, but also without, is quite high. That doesn't mean that there won't be areas where sections of the pipe are destroyed during the fire. We have to recall that the ability of a small maintenance staff with highly available materials to go and replace damaged sections of this pipe system outweigh the significantly higher costs of concrete pipe. So it's part of that cost-benefit analysis. Concrete versus the susceptibility of ADS. Which is better, the ability to replace it quickly and have a less cost now, or the ability to place it with the constraints of we need heavy equipment to do so, we can't do it with our maintenance staff. Even if it were to slide down the mountain, we'd have to have heavy equipment to bring in new replacement pipes. It's a juggling game. It has been looked at and thought about. Conclusion, based on the information we received from ADS, is that there's an acceptable risk here to address fire rates. Yes. Am I allowed to?
Let's go ahead and keep it to comments. I wouldn't have allowed that. Let's just keep it to comments.
Okay.
So go ahead.
It's my understanding, and I could certainly be wrong on this, that the water district has a certain amount of state rights to the amount of water, licenses, I guess I should say, to the amount of water they have, that they possess. And that this pipe leaves out a considerable amount of our licensed water, and if we don't use the water, we could lose the water, and that's been my biggest fear. As much as maybe 20,000 acre feet are being left out? What happens when this, what's the future of the water district? Will we lose that water? Or do we have a plan for that water that won't fit down the ditch? That's been my biggest concern. And wildlife just having some access along the ditch, which sounds like that's being taken care of. Thank you.
You want to comment on
Yeah.
it?
One more.
Or-
Yeah, it's Buck Weckman, Brownsville.
Why did I get interrupted?
Hold on.
Okay.
He's gonna go ahead and respond to her real quick.
Oh,
Jeff is,
okay.
and then we'll get to you.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Basically, what she's leading
Master
up to
plan.
is a master plan. The district never intended to make one pipeline the end-all, be-all source of supply. As we look at the potential growth of the area or demand for water in the area, you might have multiple points of connection where you could provide water. But that being a master plan project, but This by no means was the end-all, be-all, one pipe fits all. There's a lot of people above us in Strawberry and stuff in higher that may be looking for water at some time. Anyway, that would be a larger scope of effort to determine how our district's water rights are going to be expended throughout the area. So I think that
Thank you,
might
that's
help
been
you.
a huge concern of mine.
And the other thing that I might just draw reference to is, in our request for extension of time to our water rights, one of the draft conditions was that we curtail or eliminate losses in the Forbstown ditch. So this is compliant to that draft order to get an extension of time to keep our water rights secured.
Thank you for answering.
Okay, Mr. Graver, I just have one quick question.
Let's see, take comments. Weapon.
Buck Weckman, Brownsville, residential water user. I just wanted to mention to the board, perhaps not all of you know this, but one of the fabricated falsehoods that's been put forth to prevent forward movement on this ditch project, the investigation by the State Water Board has been completed, and all of the allegations have been proven to be false, okay? So I want you, so that impediment has been removed. But as I can see it, there are certain individuals here that, certain entities or individuals that want to prevent this project from going forward, regardless of the benefits of it, and that affects me. And I see them, Director Gretchen Floor being one, the North Yuba Water Alliance, who recently I got an email from Alton Wright, who stated he was a manager on that site plus the Yuba Vision site, are simply opposed to this. And they'll make objections to the fact that where are the toilets, portable toilets, going to be stationed at each side as you go along the way. This is ridiculous. They tried to remove from us a $500,000, $500,000 grant to our people here, to our benefit. So you have an opportunity to move forward on this project, and I certainly urge you to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, in the portion of the ditch that's gonna be buried, what's the approximate depth of fill over it?
You can respond if you like.
Yeah, 2 foot, approximately 2
Okay,
foot.
thank you.
Sir?
Zach Cross. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I do have some experience in underground construction. I did it for about 15 years with my uncle on and off. And what the contractor will probably do is put a reducer with a flex line diverting the water into the ditch so there's no shutdown. As a contractor, you only get a limited amount of time before the rain sets in and you can't work anyway. Also, I was reading the territorial dispatch and reviewing the report DWR sent back, and I just wanted to thank you guys for maintaining honesty and integrity. It seems like you're really following a formula to make most everybody happy within your district, and I appreciate that. I wish more entities of the government were like most of the board here. Like Buck said, there's a certain amount of people who are angry for whatever reason, personal vendettas against you or whatever, and they will always be troublemaking as long as you stay true and, you know, there's no validity to their claims. You will have my support and many of us willing to support this district and what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, can I get a roll call vote for approval of item C, the acceptance of the engineering specifications and plans for the Forbstown project, pipeline project?
President Hanser,
Yes.
Vice President Brown,
Yes.
Director Nielsen,
Yes.
Director Hawthorne,
Yes.
Director Floor.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, item D.
Can I just clarify for the record that that acceptance must be a resolution dealing number or?
Oh, yes, I apologize. So that's resolution number 19-734.
Thank you.
Okay, item D, reserve funds. This is for the board to authorize the use of the reserve funds to pay North Star Engineering for the completion of the Fort Sound Ditch Pipeline Project planning documents.
I move that we accept resolution 19-735.
I'll second.
Doesn't there have to be discussion before we,
Right after first.
No, you can,
Yeah.
after it's moved in second, you can have discussion.
So
Either
Well,
way, you can do it before or after.
we'll open it up to board discussions if anybody has any.
yes, how much do we owe North Star? Because as of the end of July, according to this, we only owe them $28,546. Mr. Maupin?
I'm not prepared to answer that question, I can look it up for you.
Yes, I will need that information. How are we to vote on using reserve funds for some undisclosed amount of money? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the amount is in the,
Yeah, I thought there was a set amount of the reserve
Okay,
fund.
so what you're
There's also
saying
a
is
breakdown.
that in 1 month, North Star has generated $225,725?
This is for the continuation of the planning project. This is the environmental work. These are the things that Neil had just addressed that need to move forward. We have, he has provided a breakdown to show where the cost will be spent.
It hasn't been spent, it's the proposed.
It's proposed.
Okay,
It's basically approving
and
the
what,
use of that
what
for the upcoming
about,
works.
what about the extension of the grant? They still have $165,000. I understand that they're just waiting for some secret documents, even draft secret documents, to release that $165,000, so we wouldn't actually have to go through all this stuff.
I don't, I think, so the extension was, I'm not sure what all of the holdup in the extension was, and maybe part of it was the investigation, but they have copies of the draft documents that we've prepared to date.
Secret
So,
documents.
Yeah,
So the extension should be, so they should be granting an extension, and what's
We're-
wrong with waiting for
An
that?
extension of time has been applied for. It hasn't been approved yet. This effort right here keeps North Star on point to keep moving forward. Once the extension of time is granted by the state, that money would become available to us. This is also monies that, although coming out of our reserve, have been offered by Yuba Water Agency in a grant form. So you'll be reimbursed either by that grant from Yuba Water Agency or from the state in the extension of time.
Okay, so do we have a change order, because the amount of money in the original scope of work was $500,000. This puts you $60,000 over that. Typically, a change order accompanies this with the justifications as to why you need this change order.
I would say that a majority of the difference, even of what's remaining in the original, 100, that whatever you said the number was, would be the land access component, and agreements. So, and I believe that we've prepared at least a draft of what the different components are for, that go along with the
So you've
225.
submitted a change order to?
I don't think we did it as
No.
more of a change order, it was just a clarification of the scope.
Yes, so either we can produce a new contract to move forward with land ownership agreements, which was not included in the original contract, but is necessary to allow construction to occur without stops. That's one way, or we can write a change order to add that scope to our current project. That is the difference between the total amount that was contracted originally and the additional amount that is included in this additional funding.
Well, so to the board, having the paperwork all lined up is very important when we're talking about this kinds of money. $60,000 is a lot of money to most of us. So rather than just doing some blanket thing of, okay, we're just gonna do this, we need to have some differentiation. Up to that $500,000, great. We need either a change order with the justification for the change order or a new contract for this additional scope. That keeps everything clean. That keeps everything lined up, and that makes sure that we're following our fiduciary responsibility as directors.
Barbara, do you have a comment about that?
Well, I agree that, there should be either a change order or, this doesn't really appear to be a change order. It appears to be additional work, so I would propose a different contract or or an amendment to the
Yeah.
scope of work on the existing contract
We
versus a
could do it
change.
both ways, and we do
Yeah.
it commonly that way, so
Yeah.
it doesn't matter to me, to us.
Yeah, I would, so any approval on this transfer of funds should be accompanied that, to see on the next board meeting, that amendment to the contract or change order, whichever way you wanna paper it. But it should, I agree, it should be papered.
Anything over the 500,000, because that was the original contract.
I would point out that the land ownership agreement was the movement forward with that is based on encouragement from the water agency who is proposing to fund that effort. And we agree with that, but it was not included in our original scope. So I don't think there's a funding issue with the water agency, it's just.
No, I'm just worried about the contractual side
Sure.
of things, because the
No.
paperwork is everything.
Of course,
So we wanna make sure everything's just got very neat, clean lines and everything is buttoned up
sure, agreed.
from a contractual standpoint.
So based on that comment, I assume, Jeff, then you would be requesting in the grant from UBA, that additional funding or already have.
That's what the next item will be.
Mhm. But we can certainly work the
So we
contract.
can,
Yeah.
Is this gonna cause us any problems by waiting till the next meeting?
the next meeting's 2 weeks from
No,
now.
no.
Well, I don't know.
I was asking the manager.
In order to paper it, before you agree to the transfer of the funds?
That's up to you. I mean, is it gonna cost us time? Yeah. Is it gonna stop the project? Yeah.
I don't think Edith's gonna do either one of those things, because all we're saying is instead of doing 225,725, you're subtracting approximately 60,000 from that. So now what you're doing is you're basically saying, okay, we're gonna transfer instead of this much, $165,000. And I don't really think that there's too many consulting companies that could spend $165,000 in 2 weeks. So if you just change this number to 165,000, or take 500,000 minus $336,331.50, which is approximately $164,000. Write that in, $164,000, approve that. Now we've got our 500,000, and they can submit whatever it is they wanna do, a new contract for the remaining, but I don't think they can spend $164,000 in the next 2 weeks.
I think, like
I know,
was described, was it's not being spent, we're approving that the upcoming work that they're going to be doing. This is authorizing how we're gonna be paying for that. The upcoming environmental and the
Right,
upcoming
and
outreach
by-
for the,
Okay, and by doing, if we authorize $164,000, they have $164,000 to spend to do all this work. Okay, so again, we're meeting in 2 weeks at our regular board meeting, unless someone calls another special meeting next week. We are meeting again, and they could have submitted, I mean, normally, I don't know, I can go home and I can write a change order and submit that within 24 hours. What I'm saying is, this is not done in a neat package. We don't have any contractual background on what the additional monies are for. We have a contract, in fact, I have 2 of them right here. $500,000 is what we agreed to. This is what we have. And so they're asking for 60,000 more, that's fine. Come back with your additional contract or your new scope of work or your new change order, blah, blah, blah. In the meantime, we approve $164,000, And since it took them over a year to spend $336, I would assume that the next 2 weeks they can get by and get a lot of work done for $164,000.
Well, I'll
That
amend my,
seems fine to me.
I'll amend my, motion to say subject to receiving the change order.
Well, can we change the amount here? I mean, is that allowed?
Sure,
So if we did sort of what she said, and then we come back in 2 weeks, change order for an additional 60,000, 2 weeks from now, we're right back on, they have money to proceed. So
Correct.
it makes, let's just
And
do that.
are we deciding to have the scope changed? Is that how we wanna see it? Just the
Well, just
scope?
see it.
The
with-
change order would include scope for that specific
It
portion.
would spell out what
We can
that
clarify it
60,000
all.
is
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's clarified in the document.
Okay.
We'll extract that portion out. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I'll withdraw my motion and, make the change in the amount.
Okay.
So you should just make the
And
record
resubmit it.
clear what amount of money is gonna be approved from the reserve fund. Cause that's what you're doing, you're just moving the money out of reserves to be
Right.
spent for this particular project. And then assumedly reimbursed by grant funding later.
Okay. Just got a calculator.
165,000.
Even.
Yeah,
And you seconded that?
164,275. You wanna be exact?
The engineer.
Well, they charge us $75 for the change order.
yeah, the amount doesn't, from the reserve doesn't have to be exact, but
Okay.
it's up to you guys.
It'll just keep.
$163,668.50. 163,668.25.
Say we just call it an even 165,000. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Works
good.
for me.
Okay. So we'll change the amount for the reserve funds in the amount of $165,000 with the understanding that the change order and scope of work will be brought forward at the next board meeting in the amount of $60,000.
Or, yeah, whatever.
Or
amount
whatever.
it is.
Whatever the
That's
the remainder, okay.
Yeah.
So we had a first, we have a second,
So it's paragraph 5 is where the number is
okay.
in the resolution, 19-735.
Right, so,
Okay.
you know, that res will have to be revised.
Hanser, the second.
Yes. And Director Hawthorne first. Okay. Roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment on this? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
President Hanser,
Yes.
Vice President Brown,
Yes.
Director Nilsson,
Yes.
Director Hawthorne,
Yes.
Director Floor.
Yes.
Okay, item E, Yuba Water Agency. Request of grant funds from Yuba Water Agency for $225,725 for the Forbstown Ditch Pipeline Project. This also has a resolution number 19-736. Any questions?
This, actually doesn't make any sense to me at all, why we would go to Yuba Water Agency and ask for money. Number one, we have a grant, all they need are CEQA documents to grant the extension, which would give $165,000 back to us, first of all. So we have that. Second of all, we have over $5 million in reserves. Why do we want to go and ask for charity from your water agency? This is, I don't know, the third or fourth time in the last 2 years that North Human Water District has gone to Human Water Agency and asked for money, and it's not free. There's gonna be some expected payback somewhere down the line. What is that payback?
I don't know what that means, I'm not sure.
We just paid them off actually after the former boards didn't pay them back for several years. We just cleaned the slate with them. I move that we accept resolution 19-736.
I second that.
More comment? Public?
A grant is money given to our agency, in this case from another agency, which is my understanding is we don't have to pay it back. Why would any board member vote against some agency want to give us some money to improve our operation? I can't understand what logical reason anyone would have against this proposal. Approve it.
Anyone else? Ma'am?
My name is Donna Corson, I live in Dobbins. Grant money is taxpayer money, it's not free money. Somebody's putting up the money somewhere, it comes out of our tax dollars, or money generated that should be belonging to the taxpayer. So it's very concerning, and it's not free. I'm sorry, I lost another point, so.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a roll call vote, please, for item E, resolution number 19-736 for Yuba Water Agency, grant funds in the amount of $225,725.
President Hansard,
Yes.
Vice President Brown,
Yes.
Directors Nielsen,
Yes.
Director Hawthorne,
Yes.
Director Floor.
No.
Adjournment. Need a motion to adjourn.
It's your turn.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Thank you.
Adjourned at
Oh, no, no, no.
9:35. I don't have my